Hi, I'm Craig Dumont, PentecostalPastor.com. With me, as is always the case, Dr. Mark Barber, and we are continuing our conversation through the Gospel of John. And for the last several weeks, we have camped out at the well with Jesus and the woman at the well. It's interesting. Her name is never. I mean, a lot of other
Yeah.
places, women's. I mean, they're not always mentioned, but there's a lot of time spent here, and the woman's name never comes up. I don't think.
Yeah.
Not that it has to, but it's just kind of
Yeah.
interesting that.
At the same time, I've just did a two-sermon series on chapter 4, which freshly put up at sermons.logos.com/profile/MarkAbarber. And you can, since we're going to be at least a couple more weeks at the well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, well, it's a
No, that's fine with me. This is
this
pretty
is a big
interesting.
part of my dissertation was on the woman at the well.
Oh, okay.
Or at least one of the texts, the other texts.
So what you're saying is we've got to spend a lot of time here to justify your your.
That's right. I have to fog you a while. But anyway, let's just pick up on that.
I didn't know. Wait a second. I thought that you had one on preaching. We put up the
No,
one.
preaching, preaching, teaching, but it was involved the Jesus means of evangelism, and I took two means. One was a woman at the well.
Yeah. Okay.
Another means of evangelism was Acts 17, Paul in Athens.
Yeah.
Those are the two texts to show example. How would you approach, people, with the gospel?
Yeah.
So how do you preach and teach? And by the way, part of the thing is that it was very postmodern in the day of Jesus.
Yeah.
As far as the same sort of despair that
Well,
the philosophers couldn't answer the
that was the
questions
name
of
of your.
truth.
That was actually the name of your. Of
Preaching and teaching in a postmodern context.
Yeah.
So.
It's been a while since I put up there. Sorry, I forgot some of the details.
All right.
We do have that, by the way, on our website.
It is. Okay, so anyway, let's pick up at verse 16.
Chapter 4, verse 16.
16, yeah.
Okay.
Jesus saith unto her, Go call thy husband and come hither. The woman answered and said, I have no husband. Jesus saith unto her, Thou hast well said. I like the word well, and we're talking about well, although those are different words in English. I have no husband. For thou hast had 5 husbands, and him whom thou now hast is not thy husband. In that sayest thou truly. The woman saith unto him, Sir, I perceive that thou art a prophet. Our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and you say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. Jesus saith unto her, Woman, believe me, the hour cometh when you shall neither in this mountain nor yet at Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship what you know not. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. But the hour cometh, and now is, that when the true worshippers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father seeketh such to worship him. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. So that's the basically, the woman's been found out with the first thing when she says, "Go call your husband." Jesus in his approach, of course, is drawing the woman into from where the woman thinks she's got the power. She got the bucket, she's got the rope, it's Jesus that needs to be saved. And now all of a sudden he's talking about water, and then he talks about it, drink, and he says, if you drink the water I've got to give, maybe he's not mad. I don't know what this water is, but give it to me so that I don't have to come back here and draw it anymore. Put plumbing in my house. You just run. Can you run here? You know plumbing? Pipe me from here so I don't have to come and draw. Now, obviously, she shows herself slowly catching on to what Jesus is saying. Jesus takes ordinary things. And we talked about the idea that Jesus sometimes meets us in the ordinary things of life. An extraordinary appointment. He must needs be here. But it's also an appointment for us. And sometimes the appointments we have with the Lord don't come, spectacular worship service or, the great move of the Spirit. Sometimes it's when we're in our tasks of everyday life. So that's what kind of the things that we discuss. Now, anyway, Jesus makes a strange response, at least to us. Go call thy husband. Now, if we read the Bible, it talks about some women that were trying to teach in the church that Paul was addressing to Timothy, and I think French Arrington is right in his approach towards it. It's not that women can't teach. It's that that women were not customarily taught what we would call the Old Testament, the Scripture, the Torah. I don't use that word for convenience. I don't believe in an Old Testament and a New Testament. I believe is one testament, and it's divided into two halves, and the second, it gives clarity.
I think it's more than that. I mean, because you're in the New Testament. I mean, again, using the term New Testament, and you can find educated, brilliant women all over, and Paul is still saying that not to teach. There's some caveats to that, and it's within a organizational authority setting. I guess I would say.
Well, if you look at what
I think it's
what
hard
I'm
to
trying
move
to
away.
say is,
I think it's hard to get away from
French
that.
Arrington was saying that they were not, they were still novices. And you notice as not a novice, it doesn't necessarily, obviously there's argument whether women should preach or teach, and you can establish what is normally a role, saying this seems to be the normal role, but women bring back the message that Jesus is risen from the dead. Junie is called an apostle, and I don't want to get too far in, but the idea here, this woman is going to be about to become an evangelist. Mm-hmm. Now she's not going to give any great content, she's just going to testify what she knows. And
well, Mark, by the way, there's no doubt that every Christian, male or female, doesn't matter, we're all called to be evangelists. We're all called to share the good news of Jesus Christ. So that's totally different.
Well, anyway, I don't want to get too bogged down, but certainly in that day, women, it says if a woman has questions, let her ask her husband at home. In other words, not disturb the order of worship. In other words, that is clear enough. Now you can talk about whether that is for today or not, but that certainly, if you don't understand it was then, go call your husband. In other words, and let me tell him, because maybe you're not catching on to things as well as you ought to. Go call your husband, and so it's the idea of the authority. Now Jesus is not, of course, Jesus is not. He knows everybody's heart. He's asking that question not because he's interested for her. She knows all about the husbands and the man that she's with. So he's tapping in his divine sense to something to show the woman something that he knew, that she knew, that he couldn't have known. He wasn't part of the village, maybe some of the men knew her, and we talked about that before. Right. Maybe some of the men knew her, but how could this man, a Jew, have known? And she responds, of course, I have no husband, and Jesus now completely turns the power play. Now I'm in control, as always was. And I looked weak, and I looked about the point of death, but and I had disappointment. I was truly tired. I was truly thirsty. I was truly at the point of death. Mm-hmm. But I was always in control. And you see Jesus on the cross. He's always in control. All the rest of Jesus, you had nothing but raw emotions going out, right? You have either anger or fear or both. People are just expressing all these things. And Jesus is who has the most to lose, earthly speaking, is the only person that's in his right mind. Some people are even mocking or cursing or spitting or they're hiding. And Jesus is the only one, even though he's been beaten, he's buffeted, he's going to be scourged, he's going to be spit on, he's going to be crucified. And of course, what you have to understand, this points towards the cross. Jesus is kind of revealing the path to the cross even here in early, in his ministry. And you have to understand Jesus being in control of the situation. He's in control even on the cross. And one of the great testimonies of the cross, and we don't talk about that so much, is we just think about his suffering, but crucifixion, like Bill O'Reilly had the idea Jesus couldn't have possibly said, because he'd be struggling for every breath, he'd hang it from his arms. Well, Bill O'Reilly ought to stick with commentary.
Oh,
conservative
his book, what was that? Killing
but
Jesus or something?
Yeah, Killing Jesus. Is that?
I never read it.
Of course they could talk. They put nails in the feet. It's you. You didn't die, at least right away from asphyxiation.
Yeah.
You had this terrible struggle that you depressed. The nails were in the nerves of the feet, but you also used your back against the splinters of the cross to try to keep yourself, so where you could breathe. And then you get a little bit exhausted. You'd start to sink, and then the weight would start falling on your hands or wrists, however they nailed them. And all of a sudden, the pain would jolt you back, and this could go on for hours and hours. And the pain was so much, is that the people on the cross as they were being cursed and spit at, would try to spit back and curse back. And all of a sudden, you see Jesus on the cross. He's saying, "Behold your mother, behold your son, forgive them, for I know not what they're doing." That Jesus is conducting business, and all of a sudden you have a Roman centurion there. It's absolutely, what is going on here? I've crucified a lot of men in my day, but I've never seen. You look what the other two people crucified with Jesus at first. They were casting insults at each other, and only by the grace of God, one man hears
Changes
and all of a
around,
sudden and turns around and he acts rationally. He asked these questions, but certainly they could speak. Usually what they said probably wasn't all that kind.
Yeah.
So
and we've mentioned that, but that was a miraculous, that everyone uses that as like a deathbed confession. That is not a deathbed confession. That is not a deathbed confession. It ended up being a deathbed confession, but that is not the theme of that. Like you said, that was a miraculous thing. They're both dying the same death. For him to be able to be changed almost instantaneously when he's looking, because it does say that both of them were cursing him
at first. One gospel says that.
Yeah, and then the other one, and then all of a sudden
says,
there's this change, and all of a sudden he's looking at a man dying the exact same death as him on the cross, and all of a sudden he sees that that's the King of Glory. That is absolutely divine
and there
revelation.
was some way
and
that
change
Jesus
in that,
deported himself. And I mean, I'm talking about the conducted, but probably more modern.
Okay, yeah.
Not deported.
Not Star Trek.
No, we're talking about deported. We think about what we're doing to get rid of
he
aliens.
Conducted himself.
But his conduct was, and that's, and you think of the people that were won to Jesus at the cross. The thief, or really robber is a better term for it. When we get to the crucifixion, we'll talk about it. We talk about the centurion that says, at the point he's breaking his oath about Caesar being the Son of God, saying, "Surely this man is the Son of God." I mean, that is, and then Nicodemus coming to get himself bloody on the Passover and unclean after having probably been one of the people that cast his vote for the death of Jesus, if he was part of the Sanhedrin. We don't. I'm giving a probability. I'm not saying certainty. Because it doesn't say that Nicodemus directly was a member of the Sanhedrin, but it looks from what we can see that he was.
Yeah.
And Joseph of Arimathea probably also.
Yeah. Mark, this is a current events thing, but I don't know. You saw. I don't know if you're familiar with Scott Adams, the guy that did the Dilbert.
I know about.
Well, the only thing, he was not a Christian all of his life. Then just before the end, he says, "Yeah, all my Christian friends are telling me that I need to accept Jesus." He said, "So I've kind of made this, was it Pascal's wager?" He goes, "Yeah, I guess I'm going to accept Jesus because the other side is, I guess I'll find out, later." But he goes, "I'm going to accept Jesus because I don't want to take a chance on that." And I'm thinking, that's not accepting Jesus.
Well,
I mean, who knows what God can do?
I believe, help my unbeliulbelief. I don't know.
Yeah, but maybe, but that is not what took place at the thief on the cross.
About this evangelism. That's so very often. That's what we try to do when a person's dying. Is immediately we try to exact the deathbed confession. Well, what have I got to lose? Is not the reason to believe on Jesus.
Yeah.
That's the truth. You got everything to lose. if you fail, and everything to gain if you do. But that and maybe you preach it at somebody's deathbed, because you got preach every word, every time, and every occasion we are preaching and offering Christ the way we live. So always we get back to that woman. Always that woman. Eve, that woman, the wife of Samson, the mother of Samson, that woman. The husband's named, who's got no faith. The woman doesn't have a name, and you got a lot of the woman. But anyway, she realizes, and there's a certain. We talked a little bit about the idea. She starts to deflect the conversation. Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Now, the Greek puts the extra pronoun for you in. So I perceive that you. Or if you want to put it this way, that let's take YOU and put it in all caps, and maybe bold. That you are, and the reason why you say a prophet. Now, in Greek, all nouns are definite, even if they're not marked with the. In other words, context will determine if there's no article, whether it is a definite or what we call the indefinite. There's no article That is not in the Greek. You have to make a decision whether you're talking about a prophet like Jeremiah or Ezekiel, or even John the Baptist, or so on. You see those questions asked in Caesarea Philippi about who people say that I am. And you can say, well, a prophet. But if you understand the Samaritans, and I'm saying especially with the emphatic you put in, that maybe, what would it say if you are the prophet? Now, from the Samaritan point of view. Now, it isn't that strong. You can't, you certainly could make the case, and I'm not saying, but it's just a stronger case to say a prophet.
Okay.
But there was only one prophet of any measure in the Samaritan religion. Remember, they didn't accept the other two divisions of the Bible, only the Torah. And in the Torah, you have Abraham was a friend of God. Moses, another prophet like unto me. That's Deuteronomy 18.
Yeah.
And the only other real prophet in there, in a formal sense, is Balaam. So I'm just saying that if you understand that they were looking for a prophet like unto me, a prophet like unto me, and so when you say I am, that you are that prophet. You are that one who's coming, who's going to teach us all this. I can't understand all this, but when Tahib, which was their term for it, when Tahib comes, he'll explain all of this.
Yeah. Now is that where Moses says there's going to arise a prophet?
Yes, Deuteronomy 18.
Yeah. Okay. So
like unto me, he shall teach, and it shall be.
Yeah.
That whosoever does not hear the words of that prophet shall be.
I guess you could make a very strong case that you got the entire Gospels in the Torah. I mean, in many ways, I guess they had it right.
Yeah, but as
I'm not saying that the others are.
We say that you are a prophet.
Yeah.
And then you get to the distraction. Now, in other words, you get caught. She's caught dead to rights. He knows that she's a sinner.
Okay.
Now, of low morals, you can say, well, maybe 5 husbands died, and now she's just out of desperation. She's shacking. I'm not going.
Right.
But the context seems to indicate she's the exact opposite in status.
Right.
To Nicodemus,
Yeah.
Who's a fraud, by the way. Nicodemus is you are. It says a teacher of Israel. He's almost saying you are the teacher of Israel. I mean, that same sort of thing. And you don't know this? How could you possibly? How could you possibly call yourself a teacher and you don't even know the most basic truths that I'm trying to tell you? You're thinking about wind and and where it blows and lists and all that stuff. And being born again, you can't even understand these things. How can you make a teacher? There's quite a contrast, but both of them are ignorant in a way. Mm-hmm. And this is a psychological thing. It's changed the subject. how many times you try witnessing to somebody, and all of a sudden, I'm a good man. I try to do good, and I try. In other words, you see all of these ideas to try to get look rabbit, and that's kind of what you have here. I feel is a look rabbit thing. Our fathers worshipped here on this mountain, and you say you a Jew say that Jerusalem's a place that we ought to worship. Which is it? In other words, it gets into a theological debate. Well, the thing is that that was part of the big division between the Jews and the Samaritans. It's not it is a central question. It isn't maybe not the central question is, you have to have the prophets and the writings, and as well as the Torah. It says Jesus correctly says the Jews know what we worship. You really don't. You have this idea, but you don't have you have a fuzzy picture of what things are. And we talked about going into maybe I made a allegory, which I said was an example, and we talked about that before, saying the allegory is maybe the Samaritans had cistern water, that there's still water. There was still life that was there. It was all the extra junk that made it unpalatable and hard and you ended up with a very distorted, but it was water. And maybe the Jewish understanding was the somewhat salty but much better water of the well. And Jesus is offering the pure living water. In other words, it's a step up in both cases. I think we need to, I'm using that for illustration purposes. I'm not necessarily, into allegorical exegesis, but even Paul uses an allegory to try to explain a spiritual truth.
There's lots. Well, there's lots of allegories. I mean, so that's not a problem.
I'm saying I'm not necessarily saying that's what the intention is. I'm trying to explain.
Right.
And very often that's what allegories are. Is you try to take types and anti-types or analogies. Maybe that's a better word. That you try to express what is unknown by things that are known, and that's of course analogies used everywhere. Jesus, talks about it from the sower went forth to sow, and all the parables are analogies. And, they're trying to explain a deeper truth from a common, understanding. And this is, of course, what he does here with the water. So, I mean, I don't want to, but I'm going to say that basically he says, you worship what you know what not. No, but Jews, we know what we worship, because salvation is of the Jews. Of course, the salvation of the Jews is only fulfilled in the fact that Jesus came from Judah, and so therefore, that line led to the coming of the Messiah, as we understand it.
Right.
But it says, well, we have the Jews have a better idea when it comes. Other words, now, so if you're making a comparison between Gerizim and the Samaritan faith and the Jewish. Let's say the Jewish faith. I don't want to say Judaism, because Judaism mixed a lot of stuff back into the water.
Yeah.
Okay, so it says, but believe me, the time has come. The hour is coming now is. Now, hour is a very important term in the Gospel of John. All these time markers are. I mean, if you don't have an understanding of, I could do a 2-hour video just on time markers in the Gospel of John, the 3 words for time: hour, season, and as I said, chronos, and physical time, physical hour, and season. There's 3 words and the big one is hour. And remember, all of the crosses everywhere in the Gospel of John. You see, woman, what have I to do with thee?
Yeah. My
hour is not yet come. When we were in chapter 2, we talked about it. And then you see, the next time he uses the word woman, Jesus hanging on the cross, say, woman, behold thy son, son, behold thy mother. Yeah, and then, destroy the temple of his body. And that's later on in chapter 2.
Yeah.
Behold the Lamb of God, in chapter 1, that taketh away the sin of the world. The cross is, and the hour of the cross is, so you have to look at the idea. The hour comes, not saying, well, it's now, 7 o'clock, or not 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Let's have a little time for Jesus to talk with the woman on, first day of October, or whatever calendar day it was.
One of the significance of that, and you're right about that, time markers. No one ever pays attention to time markers any time, but it's significant there because Jesus is fulfilling all of the Old Testament prophecies are going to be fulfilled in Jesus.
Yeah.
Everything is coming to a head.
Well,
which is really interesting because we project so many of those things in the Old Testament way out, 10,000 more years in the future. But Jesus uses those time to say, hey, listen, the time is at hand. It's right. It's right there.
But in John in particular, now you will notice that in chapter 7, it says, I'm not coming to the feast with you. It's not that, it's not the right time. That's not hour. You see, if the hour talks about the cross, and that's reserved for the cross. And, he uses the kairos, not the proper season.
Mm-hmm.
And that, it doesn't say I'm not coming at all. He's
right.
saying I'm not coming now.
Yeah.
And the idea is I'm not. And as far
and then
as
he turns around and goes.
It turns around and goes, but
anyway.
he's not. But it's not at the time of the Feast of Tabernacles
right.
that Jesus is going to lay down his life. The hour will be at Passover.
Yeah.
Even though by the time he gets through chapter 8, they're taking up stones to stone him. If they could have,
so how does that when he's I took you off again, but you were talking about he's speaking to the woman at the well, says the hour will come
and now is.
Now is.
Now you see, so in other words, when you talk about now is, this means it's at hand. Yes, it will be another. Depending on how you deal with the chronology, the Gospel of John's at least 2 Passovers away.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, it won't even be the next Passover because that's the feeding of the 5,000 in chapter 6. Then it'll be the Passover after that, and he's coming back from Jerusalem and from the Passover. So it'll be somewhere in the vicinity of 2 years minus whatever time he spent after. Yeah. The cleansing that temple, and if we assume that the cleansing of the temple was a separate one than from the end, and that's Passover.
I think there's a couple of them.
But it could be. But I said, understand, there are what's called time dislocations, and you can logically put things in sequence and first last, and we see that done in Matthew, of course, with the anointing of Jesus for burial. Now, John says it happens on the first day of Holy Week, right after sunset. The very first thing he does in the last week, he's anointed for burial.
Yeah.
Now, but Matthew seems to show it happened Wednesday, if you were to look at time thing. But basically, what Matthew was doing is trying to express that by putting that next to Judas coming to betray Jesus, that what he is saying is that it was what happens at the anointing of Jesus' feet, and Judas is indignant about the spending of money. That's what caused him to go to the Sadducees and the priests to betray Jesus. Mm-hmm. Now, but it's just as clearly said in actual time, which I think was on that what we call Palm Sunday, first day of the week after the Sabbath meal, the break that is prepared, and before he goes the next day to Jerusalem. That's preparation is clearly said because it distinctly says that Judas was a thief, and so in other words, the idea there by different ways is basically relating the fact that what happens at Mary's anointing Jesus' feet is what caused Judas to go to the chief priests. And so on. So, because I was saying, so you can't. We talked about that in chapter 2. You can't necessarily. Some people would say that you're doing what happened, the very last sign in Jesus' life, and compare. The first was the wedding at Cana, and the last, was the cleansing of the temple, the last sign. Now, I'm not going. We talked about that at length, and you can go back and check it. I don't want to spend too much time.
Well, I find it fascinating here because where he's talking to her about the temple. I mean, the temple was so important to the Jews. They said Jesus even talked at one point. He said you say if you swear by the temple, it's one thing of So but ultimately right here he's just saying, okay, the time of the temple I mean, it's coming to an end.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be destroyed. That's not.
No, I just think it's fascinating. So Paul, so Mark, all the way through, we see Jesus. I mean, the cleansing temple. Jesus saying it's all going to be wiped out. He is the temple,
Mm-hmm.
and yet we have Christians that pine for the rebuilding of a temple.
Yeah, wow.
I don't get that.
Let's look at
Why do we? But when we know in Hebrews says
No, there's no. There.
that if you
I
ever
also,
turn
let
back
me,
to
let
that,
me be perfectly plain. There may be some building that gets built in Jerusalem where the Temple Mount is. There may be, and I'm not saying there will be.
I don't care
I'm
about
not
that.
saying-
I'm asking you, why do Christians pine for that? I mean, you got Christians that are they just cannot wait for a new temple, and that's an abomination to God.
The book of Revelation, which they like to quote a lot, which I think it is God's word,
Well,
says
it
the new
is.
temple is going to be in heaven. That
Yeah,
Christ
yeah.
Himself is going to be that.
Well,
temple.
that's it comes
Now,
down.
And
That's
I'm
Jerusalem.
going to
by the
say,
way,
I'm going to say that is a physical location. It's a bodily resurrection. We're going to be bodily raised, and it's going to be, but it's not going to be a temple of brick and stone. It's not
No.
going to have candles. Jesus is the light of that
No,
city.
by the way, the temple that John measures is the existing. I mean, he's measuring the temple hadn't been destroyed by the time when John had the revelation.
Yeah, if you and this is of course he's going back to the book of Ezekiel too, but that's it talks about measuring the temple. But
Yeah, well, that was the one that was going to be built in the
now
future.
for that you can go talk to Dr. Peterson. He'll be happy to tell you about Ezekiel, the book of John. I think he wrote a book on it.
Yeah, he did.
And also the Apocalypse. So, but here it is. What had happened at this point to this? He says, worship on this mountain. Why was there no temple on that mountain? The Jews destroyed it 100 years earlier.
I was going to say, wasn't that what the Maccabees did?
Yeah, they destroyed the temple there. The temple, of course, still standing in Jerusalem. Now, you understand that you're worshiping, and you're basically worshiping without a temple. Now, you don't know exactly what you're doing, and I'm here to inform you on that, but you have no temple.
Okay.
Now, could the woman say, if Jerusalem's the proper place to worship right now, how far would the Samaritan woman get?
Well, they wouldn't let her into that temple.
They wouldn't even let her into the court of the women.
Yeah.
She might get out there with the Gentiles outside the gate with the bleating sheep and the money, clinking of money and the haggling over prices and stuff, and all that noise and disturbance and smell, and that's the closest she could get. You couldn't worship at that temple. It says the time is now is. Oh, is it? And is a means. The time is coming very soon.
Right.
And even in your case, since you don't even have a temple to worship at anymore, now is. They're not going to come here to this mountain or to Jerusalem, but they must worship Him in spirit and in truth. Now, we talk about the divine appointment. First of all, the first divine appointment was the Word was made flesh and tabernacled amongst us. And now it talks about He must needs go to Samaria. It's not that we come to Jesus. Jesus comes to us. That there is no special location that we have to go to, that we have to take pilgrimage to,
right?
Or go to extraordinary means, or even if we got to the gate of the temple and said, "We're not going to let you in."
We don't have to do the Mecca thing.
You ain't dressed proper for church, no how.
Yeah.
That God meets us. Now we meet God too, but the woman didn't come to the well to meet God. She had no idea.
Yeah.
But God knew.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about the idea of spirit and in truth, the first truth is the incarnation. Okay.
Yeah.
And then God comes to us. That by faith, His Spirit lives in us.
Mm-hmm.
The Spirit, who is the Spirit of truth? Jesus talks about the Spirit of truth. Spirit and truth. I am the way, the truth, and the life. So the idea, the worship there is the presence of God in us. understand the ancient tabernacle. Remember, and the Word was made flesh and tabernacled, not, note, that was a movable tent, by the way.
Yeah.
Amongst us, there was the presence of God in the midst of his people. There was three tribes, this side, this side, this side, and this side. And then there was the temple, the tabernacle complex, and the sacrifices, the holy place, and the Holy of Holies. So God was in the midst, and the Spirit of God came down, and the priest couldn't minister. We see that again against the 2 Chronicles 7 in the temple, but you see, it was not it's tabernacle, not templed.
Right.
It was, everybody, every Jew, male Jew, if they could possibly do it, were to show themselves before the Lord at the temple 3 times a year. It
is interesting because, God never commanded a temple to be built. That was David's desire. He had the tabernacle for sure, and then he gave him the specifications for the temple. Mm-hmm. But the first response from God to David was, "Hey, I don't need that, because can you contain me?" Well, then, there was a condensation. There was a grace.
Condescension, not condensation.
Yeah, not condensation. Yeah, he wasn't all wet. So sorry about that. Wrong word there. Yeah,
condescension.
Condescension. There we go. Man, I have a.
Is that one of the 3 words you get wrong before Alzheimer's sets in?
I hope it's not. Anyway, so it is interesting that when you talk about tabernacled, because it did move. It was moving
it's the
around.
presence of God in the midst of his church, whether it's in Samaria or Judea or here, where 2 or 3 are gathered in his name. All that's probably misapplied, because that's a whole different context in Matthew. But I'm not.
It is. No, you're right. But the whole idea is ecclesia, the people of God.
Yes.
It's it's where they are gathered in my name. It's really interesting that Father Shemaman, a Greek, a Russian Orthodox guy, wrote some fabulous stuff that really helped me. He talks about how church, when we go church, and he calls it church, but he said, there's a difference between just going to a gathering and having 2 or 3 Christians together, or where you leave,
or go through a rote of ritual without the Spirit.
He just talks about when you are heading somewhere. It starts in the preparation where you're starting to go to someplace with the intent of meeting in the name of Jesus. It's anyway. I don't want to get off on that, but it is interesting.
So, anyways, it talks about must worship the Spirit. And in truth. Now, there's another. She says, "Well, okay, I know when Messiah comes, he'll teach us all these things." And then there's a statement there that says, "I that speaketh with thee am he." But it's not the way it says it in Greek.
Well, is this Messiah or Christ? You're always
when the Messiah. This is one of the 2 places we talked about that.
Okay,
before.
That's right. Yeah.
One of the 2 places, but it also says which is Christ. In other words, and I think John adds the words which is Christ for our purpose. When the Messiah, which is Christ, comes.
Okay. Yeah. In my mind, it has kind of in parentheses, Christ.
Yeah, well, because it's an explanatory gloss. Yeah. Like before, it says, well, we have found the Messiah, which is being interpreted Christ. It's reminding, because there's only 2 times in the Bible, and we've already talked a lot about that.
Yeah.
But and we talked also about, I'm going to reiterate this, it's kind of going back over it, but it says, I am speaking to you. Mm-hmm. When Messiah, it says, I am. Ego, eimi. Now, that is what the Lord reveals himself to Moses on the mount. Tell him I am that I am. Tell him that I am sent you. But here it is, I am. Now, we have all those great I am statements that we find. There's 7 of them that have a predicate. That says, I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the door. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way and the truth and the life, and I am the true vine. Mm-hmm. But there are 3 blank, and there may be more, but I know I can tell you there's 3 other I am statements without a predicate. One was, "Whom seek ye?" Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus said, "I am." There's no he. He, you'll notice, is put in brackets,
Okay.
as though you're making a statement. But he would need to only say, "Amy, I am." But he says, "Ego eimi," and that's the same thing you see in Exodus 3, and they all fall backward. You see, there's something about the words "I am" there. The other time it says, "Before Abraham was,
I am, yeah.
I am." And they took up stones to stone him. Because we're stoning you because you, a man, make yourself God.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the other place. I am
Yeah.
speaking to you.
Yeah.
So, it's hidden in the language, but he's not just making a statement. He's making a statement. He is more than just the teacher of that the Samaritans are looking for. He is that. He is that promised prophet. And of course, the New Testament makes.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I mean, he comes. I mean, you talk about the servant, coming in, and they couldn't. They were looking for a whole warrior, king, I guess.
Yeah, well,
but I mean, here he is. He's so weak, as you mentioned, and this woman out of the blue, this woman recognized. That's a phenomenal. Even if she didn't quite understand it, how phenomenal is it that she can conceive of this would be the Messiah when all signs would point, and it seems like she's sincere in her question here.
But she's still. Other words, now, let me get back. You get the first level. She never uses tahib. She goes, okay, I'm convinced that salvation is of the Jews. That and I think that therefore I know that you're looking for a Messiah.
Right.
But he's not. He is the tahib. He's the promised prophet, but he's more than that. He is the Messiah.
Yeah.
But he's more than that.
Yeah.
And he certainly isn't the misconceptions that the Jews had of the Messiah, or the misconceptions
the only thing I'm saying
Samaritans
is
did.
that it's even amazing that she gets to this point.
Well, it's amazing that flesh and blood has not revealed this.
Well,
unto
I
you.
agree.
Okay.
I mean, that's what.
Now,
I mean,
here
that's
it
the
is.
foundation. Is that everything we have is through revelation.
Well, think about how much out of time. We always think to the Jew first, and also to the Greek. Now, there was
say that again. What do you mean?
Well, they think that's something Paul said.
Out of time.
Out of time.
Oh, where he said, "I was born out of out of season."
In other words,
or
the
something,
sequence is you think, that the Jews would have figured it out first because they were of the higher order.
Yeah. Okay.
Of course, not that anybody figures it out, but Peter hasn't made his confession.
Right.
All right. Even the earliest you can say the confession, if you follow the Gospel of John, is in chapter 6. This is chapter 4. Now you got also a later confession, 16:13, and he's made it, one of the disciples. I think it was Andrew, maybe it was Philip. Isn't this not the Messiah? Certainly, this is the Messiah. But Jesus is more than Messiah. He's revealing himself as I am to the Samaritans before he's revealed himself to the Jewish nation.
Yeah.
So anytime we get the idea of primacy, because it was revealed to us first that we're better. No, it was revealed to you, but it was revealed to the Samaritans actually before it was revealed to the Jews. And the Jews didn't figure it out. They're looking for Messiah, which is that salty water. There's some truth to what they perceived somewhat. It was, the water, and the Samaritans far less. They were they're the cistern of the creatures in it. But nevertheless, they come to bring the living water. And so this is a revelation of the divine Christ. He's first revealed to a woman, not just a woman, but a Samaritan woman. And not just to a Samaritan woman, but the lowest of the lowest Samaritan women. She did nothing to deserve this. This is understanding the grace. She's like Rahab.
Yeah.
Like all those other
Well,
women.
but the funny thing is, Mark, is that there's not one of us that's any better than her. We're exactly
As I said before,
like that.
Nicodemus was as much a fraud
Yeah.
And and I'm not, Nicodemus may have been a good man, a good esteem. Maybe you're probably a pretty good person. I'm not saying that, but it doesn't. That inside of God, he was a fraud.
Yeah.
But God showed mercy and grace to him.
I mean, you look at. I mean, you look back. Let's just you look back, and this has always been the case. You look back and you see David. I mean, we think of David, but David. I mean, was dark in his heart. I mean, taking Bathsheba and then killing and then a mass murderer. I mean, the darkness that came out of him, and so, but I'm exactly like that.
Well,
You're
yeah.
exactly everyone.
Yeah,
There. I mean, this woman. We look at her and we go, she's the lowest of the low, and yet you look at her and you see us. We're there.
Yeah, and you realize
We're no
that
better.
We will never see clearly.
Probably worse.
We will never see clearly the Lord.
Yeah.
Till we recognize our poverty.
Oh, man. Yeah.
And then we realize that we stand totally naked.
Yeah.
And I say spiritually speaking, it's totally naked in front of us.
Can you think of the absolute prideful statement we take when we say that,
I'm glad I decided to follow Jesus.
That's exactly right. I decided. It's like, yeah, right, yeah.
Well, the whole problem. Let's say it's the whole problem. And I only got a couple of minutes. So I got.
Sorry about that.
Come up, but let's finish with this idea. Yeah, I decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus, just like the disciples. And I'll go through the garden with them. Well, the disciples didn't go to the garden with them. Yeah, I'll go through them. And I'll go with them all the way. Well, will you?
Yeah.
This sounds like Peter in at the beginning of chapter 13 of John. It doesn't sound like the Peter that in a couple chapters later in 18 or so that says 3 times denies him. I mean, I decided to realize this. We talk about free grace as though that's in our control. Oh, well, I'm free to receive it and free to not to receive it. But the free grace is that God, who has the right to have destroyed us all, has freely chosen grace. It is his free will decision to save man, or else we'd have no choice at all, except God has offered choice. Whatever free choice, whatever the choice to, which by the way is not a choice, it is a command. Understand, repentance is imperative.
Look at Noah. Noah, it doesn't say anything about Noah except for that Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord.
No,
it talks about.
But I'm saying that the whole idea is repent is an imperative.
Yeah.
Not a choice. Now,
right.
You have a divine responsibility to respond to that choice, but you have no choice at all if God freely hadn't chosen for us. And it's God by his exercise of free, unbounded will that he saved us. And free grace, it's all about what God does. Now, and we spend, we spend 1% of our time bragging about God's grace and 99% about our choice. Without a choice being offered, there's no choice, no offer, there is no choice. You can't choose if you're going to go to hell in a handbasket, and that's the only where you're going. Mm-hmm. There is no choice. God is not under any obligation to save anybody.
No.
He's not under obligation to save some or none or all. God is God.
Yeah.
And he says, repent and believe the good news. Now that's all. And then realize that all the glory belongs to God and not to.
Well,
our
it's
choice.
just all that's exactly right. And I'm just seeing here, and I kind of sometimes I don't like it, but I mean it's like the Lord opens up your eyes to say, it's like the publican and the sinner. I'm glad that I'm not a sinner like this guy. And Jesus says,
first of all, he lifted up his head towards heaven.
Yeah.
He's looking this way, but he still notices that Gentile tax collector, collector, he might have been Jewish, but considered a Gentile because he was a tax collector. In other words, if you're really looking up into heaven, you wouldn't be trying to compare yourself to someone next to you. But anyway, it's a good discussion. I've got an appointment, so I got to get moving this morning. But we are finally going to get to the
Is it a
second half
divine
of the
appointment?
story. Huh?
I'm just kidding. I said, is it a divine appointment?
Well, you never know.
You never know. Yeah.
After I wrote the last thing before I published it, somebody came up to me and said, "You preacher."
Oh.
And all of a sudden, he wanted to know about baptism and other stuff like that. And, he had a little bit of, background. And, so I shared the gospel. I go to the Food City, your place of where you are working, but Food City, and I sit there, write sermons, and if somebody's there to run, to talk, he didn't know I didn't know he was coming, he didn't know I was there.
Oh, okay.
And see, that's a kind of an appointment. And our job maybe is to be there to speak for the Lord, and you have to take these divine appointments come sometimes in the ordinary things. This case, I was eating breakfast and working on my sermon. So anyway, we will get to the second half of the story. Okay. The rest of the story next week, and we'll talk about the disciples and upon their return. So
sounds good. Thank you, Mark.
All right.